Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I am Danielle, a registered psychotherapist who specializes in using cognitive behavior therapy. In my last video, I talked to you a little bit about worry and anxiety, how the two are related, how they're a little different, and also how they're very strongly connected to uncertainty and the fear of a negative outcome occurring when faced with uncertainty. A lot of times, individuals will engage in certain tasks and activities to avoid a negative outcome occurring altogether. However, these kind of behaviors actually feed your anxiety and worry and fuel it to a certain degree. So in today's video, what I wanted to talk to you a little bit about is examples of these kind of behaviors and tell you why they can be fuel for this anxiety and worry, and to see if there's anything that you can do to have a more productive life and to no longer let that worry take so much control over you. So off the top of your head, can you think of any tasks or activities that you engage in to avoid dealing with uncertainty, to avoid dealing with anxiety, or the possibility of a negative outcome occurring? Or even to make sure things go just right to a T all the time? What about seeking excessive reassurance when you're making a decision about something? Or double checking your work emails, double checking your phone, making excessive lists about things, doing a whole lot of research, or even responding to people immediately. This is actually a pretty common one, that you respond to text messages immediately with a sense of urgency rather than giving yourself a bit of a delay. All of these things are examples and very common things that people do when they're faced with worry and anxiety. It is what they do to minimize the distress that they have when they are feeling anxious and worried. There is nothing inherently wrong with these kind of activities or behaviors. In moderation, they can be extremely helpful for a lot of different things. But when they are used to minimize your anxiety or minimize discomfort, sometimes the relief from these activities can be very short-lived. Or they become so effortful in your life and time-consuming that it starts zapping your energy. It makes you a little bit irritable. It might interfere with your sleep. It might even interfere with your concentration because it's all you can think about, right? So for example, if you're somebody who likes everything done a certain way, you like everything done to a T, and you can't stand the thought of anything going wrong whatsoever, what do you think you're gonna do? You might resort to doing everything on your own, right? So for example, you might be somebody who does all of the chores on your own at home, all of the household duties, all of the household responsibilities, or even all of the work tasks if you're employed somewhere, right? And what happens when this occurs? In the moment, you might experience initial relief and think, I can breathe again. Everything is just the way I like it. That's wonderful. But over time, what does it do to you in the long term? Likely, it might make you burn out. It might even make you resentful because other people aren't helping you. When these things start to happen, it can be very distressing in your life. So it might be time to start looking at those behaviors and examining them to see whether or not they are helpful to you still or not. What may have been helpful to you at one point in your life might not be helpful anymore. It's okay to start changing your way of doing things sometimes. One of the techniques that we use in therapy is called behavioral experiments. So what we use for behavioral experiments is we use them to treat your anxiety and worry, to see how helpful these behaviors actually are for you, and to see what would happen if you started to adjust them. So there's various steps that we take to do this, and I would encourage you to grab a sheet of paper, and you can do this with me. You can write these steps down to start practicing these things on your own. So the first step is to examine the things that you worry about. Obviously, if you're going to start changing the behaviors associated with what you're worried about, you want to know what you're worried about. So grab a sheet of paper and write down what you're going to monitor. So you're going to monitor your worries over the next week or two, or however long you like. In therapy, typically we recommend 1 to 2 weeks, and monitor what you're worried about. Every time you notice a worry pop into your mind, jot it down. And then next to that, write down what you did when you noticed that worry. Write down about 2 to 3 worries a week and identify if there's any patterns going on there. Whether it's their health, social things, the world, missing deadlines, missing out on something, disappointing something. There's usually themes in people's worry. So you want to identify what your themes are. What are you most likely to worry about? And what are you most likely to do about your worry? So grab a sheet of paper, in one column write worries, and the next column write behaviors. And then every time you notice your worry, next to it, write down what activity you're doing as a result. The second step to this process is to review this list at the end of the week or the end of the 2 weeks, whichever you want, and identify what themes stood out to you. Is it health related? Is it social related? Is it work related? What themes stand out to you about the things that you worry about? And when you notice these themes, this is going to lead you to step 3, is choose one worry theme. You might notice a whole bunch, that's fine, but start with one, just to make it as simple as possible. So choose one worry theme and one behavior to work on. So for example, if you worry that you'll miss out on something and you respond immediately to people, you can use that as a behavior and a worry to start experimenting on. So start with one thing. In the next step, you start devising your experiment. And you can start with smaller experiments if you like. So for the previous example I talked about worrying about missing out on something and then responding immediately to someone, what you can do as an experiment is shift the duration. So instead of an immediate response, change that to, okay, so when somebody texts me, I am going to wait 10 minutes before I respond. So change the duration. Experiment with yourself to see what's going to happen if you wait that 10 minutes to respond. And in the next step, after you have decided on what experiment that you're going to do, decide on what you think what predictions you think you're going to have. What do you predict will happen if you delay responding to somebody? And be specific about this, because after the experiment, you'll be able to see if this actually happened or not. So for example, if you predict that the person will no longer talk to you again, or if you predict that they will respond in a negative way to you or comment on you taking so long to respond, write those predictions down. And in the next part, after the experiment is over, look at your outcome. Did the things that you predicted happen? Did they not? If the outcome did occur, and this will happen sometimes with people, depending on what kind of an experiment that you make and what kind of a behavior it is, but if the outcome does occur, how did you cope with that? If what you're worried does happen, that's okay. That is normal. That happens every day to people. But it is still an opportunity for you to start managing your anxiety and to start learning from it. So in that situation, think of what you learned. What did you notice? Instead of avoiding it again, ask yourself, what steps do I need to take to handle this thing in the future? If you're going to worry about anything, why not start worrying about how you're going to change your life?